Hi, and welcome to the show. Rate and review at kevinmd.com/rate. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Today in the show, we have Samantha Lai. She's a medical student, and her Kevin MD article is titled Medical Innovation, a Serendipitous Step Toward Gender Equity. Samantha, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we'll get into the article in a little bit, but first off, briefly share your story and journey to where you are today.
Sure. So I'm a little less experienced than a lot of the guests you have on your podcast, but I'm a second year medical student right now, and I just started my clinical year just a week ago. But before medical school, I went to undergrad at UC Berkeley, where I majored in neurobiology and computer science. And I always thought I was going to do something kind of in the intersection between those two fields. And so after college, I took a couple gap years and I worked at a health tech startup in Berkeley. And that really sparked my interest in kind of bridging the gap between kind of the world of tech and the world of medicine. Ended up after a couple of gap years deciding to still apply to medical school, but it really informed kind of how I see the role of someone in medicine as it relates to tech, and as both fields kind of advance, sometimes in kind of different directions. I think it's more and more important to kind of think about that relationship and how we can best bridge it. So
I know you're
today.
just at the beginning of your medical school journey, but I'm interested during your gap years when you were working for that health tech startup. What are some of the biggest things that you've learned? What are some of the more eye-opening observations that you saw?
Yeah, so I think one thing was that it is absolutely crucial when you're innovating in the medical field to include the people who are going to be working with that technology. And so I think both, I might get a little flack for saying this, especially with my inexperience, but I think both the fields of medicine and tech are kind of, they're very proud fields. Everyone's really proud of the work they do. Everyone's very, highly educated, super smart. And what I realized is that I think we have to kind of take a look at that hubris sometimes when we're kind of trying to bridge those two fields and try to, I guess, extract the best of each side. And so tech moves super fast. They're all about failing fast and, innovating, and that allows them to move as quickly as they do with the kind of exponential growth that we see as characteristic of the technology world. Medicine, on the other hand, can't really do that. We're really rooted in like evidence, and research moves slowly, and that's because we want to keep people safe. And sometimes those things can seem antagonistic, but I think that there's a lot to learn from seeing how we can kind of bridge those things in a helpful way. And so while I was working in tech, I thought it was really important to include the user, which ended up being people working in the healthcare field who are super concerned about patient safety, but also not kind of adopt what seems to be in medicine very common, is that this idea of the status quo is just how it is. And I think that's something that medicine can really learn from tech. So I guess what I learned was that sometimes it's really frustrating to try to bridge those two fields, but there's definitely a lot to gain.
Now, from that tech lens, while you were working there, how did they reach out to medical professionals? How did they reach out to get that input from people who are on the front lines of the healthcare field?
So we would work really closely with certain practices, like small private practices, and have them literally demo our product in their practice, little by little, trying to gauge whether it was helping making them more efficient or whether it was slowing it down. And they would give us really candid feedback on how it was affecting their work. And that was really helpful because, you can kind of theorize however much you want about what you think is going to help a physician in their practice. But, when they're sitting in front of a patient and the patient has a real world concern about how their health problem is going to affect their life, you kind of have to throw all those theories away and kind of just think about what's sitting right in front of you. So it was a good feedback loop getting those physicians in there.
And then from that tech company, did they say we need to adapt based on how these end users were using our product? Or did they say we know better, doctors are just Luddites and they should just do things our way? So what was their response to some of that feedback?
Definitely more on the side of since this is our end user, we really need to be designing for them. I think, every company has a vision and kind of mission that they're trying to advance. And so I think the higher level direction of the work was always kind of trying to achieve that vision. But when it came down to, exactly how the product worked and how it was going to impact the physician's day-to-day practice, they're the expert on what they're doing day to day.
All right, let's talk about your Kevin MD article titled Medical Innovation, a Serendipitous Step Toward Gender Equity. Now, how did this article come together?
Yeah, so I think, like I said, I've always kind of had an interest based on my undergrad background in how I could merge my two sort of fields of study. And I guess what I realized as I was in my gap years and deciding whether I wanted to apply to med school, I felt like by choosing medicine, I was kind of afraid that I might be giving up some of the kind of agency that you can take in tech to pick a problem and then really like research it and, innovate towards making it better. And that kind of freedom that I felt was characteristic of the tech world and characteristic, maybe naively, I thought that it was not characteristic of the medical world. What I realized is that, like I've kind of touched on already, I think there's a huge gain to be had from finding a way to bring that kind of spirit of innovation into medicine. And so this article is just kind of one step in my ongoing journey in figuring out what that actually looks like. And I guess the reason I wrote it was because I was helping with a project with the American Medical Women's Association, and they're putting on the first ever AMWA Innovation Challenge, where they're inviting these physician innovators to present their projects and potentially get funding to support them and bring them to life. And it really helped me, or it made me question why this isn't more of a thing in medicine. It's also been found kind of separate from the world of medicine that there is a pretty big disparity in the amount of venture funding that's given to women versus men. And I guess when I say women, I should also include like other kind of gender identifying minorities. And part of that is
how big is that disparity, just to give us an idea?
So the research that I cited in the article showed that only 3% of venture funding is represented by women and gender minorities. So I think that's obviously a huge disparity. And I think the obvious question then is like, how do we bridge that disparity? How do we minimize that disparity? Women receive significantly less funding when they're asking for funding in fields that are predominantly made up of men. Basically, the idea is that there's kind of a two-pronged approach to kind of mitigating this. Either we sort of make the stage of like looking for venture funding more equitable, or we start with fields that are already more equitable and we kind of generate or encourage more venture funding to be kind of pushed towards those areas. And I guess what my article is talking about is how medicine is a really kind of serendipitous place for this innovation to kind of start picking up, just because tech and medicine is growing so quickly, and kind of independently of the kind of gender disparities in venture funding, there actually are shrinking gender disparities in medicine. We're in a time now where like fully half of medical school classes are women, sometimes even more.
Yeah.
And so the kind of discrimination that women may face when seeking venture funding may not exist in the form of this person doesn't belong in their field. This person is a woman seeking funding in a predominantly male field. And so I guess for me, when I kind of connected the dots there, it seemed like medicine is a great place for people to start innovating, just because women, with the exception of, a lot of different situations, there are many situations in medicine where women do feel welcome. Women obviously do belong in medicine, but the kind of obvious gender disparity, I guess we're lucky that it's shrinking to the point where that kind of part of the venture funding discrimination might have a lesser effect because we have such improved gender equity in medicine now. Not to say that it's perfect, but hopefully that's a good place to start.
So if you're a woman in medicine or a female medical trainee and want to become more active in the innovation space, so obviously you have a background in this, but someone who doesn't have your background, how can they get more involved in that space?
Yeah, I guess one place to start was, not to put a plug in for the project that I was working on, but AMWA, the American Medical Women's Association, is hosting the very first Innovation Challenge, and they're going to try to make it an annual event, which is really just a space for people to bring their ideas, however kind of formed they are. They might just be an idea that they had that they haven't really written up or anything, or they could have like a full-fledged startup. This is the kind of space where we're inviting women in medicine who have had innovative ideas and acted upon them to present them. And the word we've been using is to socialize their ideas, because we know that when people socialize their ideas, the ideas become, well, more people know about them, they're more supported, and it's really just encouraging people in the healthcare field, not necessarily just physicians, to just see innovation as a path that they can take, and not just something that people in other fields do, or something that's so far removed from the world of healthcare that they can't participate in it.
Now, would they need a special background in business? Do they need an MBA? Do they need a background in tech or science to participate in these innovation challenges?
No. So I think what the idea we're really trying to push here is that the field that they are in, the background that they have from being in that field is the expertise that they need, because they're the person who can best identify the challenges and the kind of daily inefficiencies and points of friction that they could potentially solve with a new idea, a new innovation. That's kind of in contrast to someone on the outside who is kind of looking in and hoping to impose a new, like a product or an innovation on the field. It's really important to show people that whatever they are doing, they're the experts on it and we need their input.
So tell me your ideal world. If all your ideas and passion gets implemented, your ideal vision, what would happen next?
I think it would look like a person who identifies inefficiency in their field and feels like they can do something about it, instead of feeling like, oh, this is just the way things are. Like, oh, this product is so poorly designed, but it's just what we use. I know that the steps from having an idea to actually, having a different product in your hand, that's a whole other story. But I think in my ideal world, people feel agency to take action on that kind of feeling of, I wish this were better, and agency that they can be the ones to be the effectors of that change.
Now, among your medical school peers, approximately what percentage of them have that background or passion when it comes to innovation?
There are a few. So at my medical school, we do have a innovation in medicine club where we host like panels, for example, of people who have taken a path similar to this, who have either used their expertise to, create a product or a service based on kind of a need that they saw in their training. I think it really speaks to the fact that this is a growing sort of sentiment in medicine, that people in medicine belong in tech, people in medicine belong in, I guess, deserve to have that kind of agency over the environments that they work in.
Now, how about formal training? Do you feel like medical schools in general, do they have any formal training for those future physicians who are interested in tech and innovation?
I would say it's probably rarer right now. I know a lot of medical schools, including mine, have a kind of MD, MBA track, but it's definitely, I think, while a growing sentiment, a less common one. But I'm hoping that'll change as, people realize that we all have agency in kind of contributing to the products on the market and solving the problems that we face. It's not something that's only someone else can do.
Now, other than this AMWA Innovation Challenge, what other resources would you recommend to those medical students and physicians interested in going to that tech space?
I'm sure at a lot of different institutions that there is a group or some kind of organization kind of focused on this intersection between tech and medicine. I would honestly just recommend searching up like your institution name and like innovation or like tech, and just kind of seeing what comes up and talking to people. This is like a pretty new and like growing way of thinking in medicine, I think. And so sometimes the most valuable conversations I've had about this have just been on the fly rather than kind of reaching out to a specific published resource or something.
And my final question, tell us some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience.
Yeah, I think people in medicine are really great about challenging the status quo in terms of kind of social situations, like making sure that people are treated equitably and equally in their medical care. And I think that's really important. And at the same time, we also need to kind of question the status quo when it comes to the tools that we work with, and not feel like what we're given is all that we can work with. And that goes from, the kind of medical hierarchy sometimes and like kind of interpersonal things to literally the tools that we work with. If we feel like they're not well designed, or if they're, there can be improvements, to feel like there's actually something that can be done about that, and that it's not just like, oh, that's just how we do things, or that's just how it is. So I would just encourage people to maintain that agency whenever possible. And I understand, this may come off as naive just because I'm so early in my training, but I really think that, I don't know, what do we have to gain from not believing that we can have that agency?
Samantha, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. And thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.